Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to share our experience here today. I'm really thankful to be invited here and in this special occasion, the celebration of the 100th year of the UC. First of all, I would like to say what we are, what I consider ourselves. We are, as Alex Bank, a local bank belonging to an international group. I stress this because sometimes I am addressed as a foreign bank. I don't consider ourselves as a foreign bank. We are a local bank, and this is pretty much in line with our DNA to be a banking group that try to serve the need of the territories where we work, because we are really close to the concept of serving all our stakeholders, and our shareholders are definitely one of our stakeholders, but not everything. So, first of all, I like to affirm this. In our group, Intesa Sanpaolo Group, that is one of the biggest Italian European group, we pay a lot of attention to corporate social responsibility, and just to give you an idea, in the last 4-year business plan that was launched in 2018, the group set not only economic targets, but also social targets. And for us, this is extremely important. The bank, the group is listed in many sustainability index, and definitely this is also something that we pursue because definitely we revert to investors that are looking for responsible companies. I always say to my people that whatever we do as a component of corporate social responsibility, because we are operating in a very critical sector, and that is the reason why our sector is so highly regulated, because definitely depending on the way we work, we can impact quite substantially to the society. But of course, we have also strengthened our operation in what we call the CSR field, embracing the logic of creating shared value. The logic of creating shared value is applied in all our business, but also let's say, in the specific target given to a structure that has been created, that is corporate social responsibility and sustainable development, that is reporting directly to myself, to the CEO of the bank. And in this, through this office, besides, let's say, performing what are commonly known as CSR activities, we also root part of our business. For example, one of the things we strongly believe is that we need to exercise the maximum protection, especially to customers that are weaker. For example, when we talk about microfinance, and we can expect that our customer in this field, their level of literacy and especially financial literacy is very limited, we need to give the maximum protection. So we have reviewed completely our operation in this field, and now we tend to operate cooperating with NGOs on the territories, studying the needs of the population that are under the program that are managed by these NGOs, and we create and we design the products based on the real needs. We walk away from the logic to have the microfinance as a product made of 12 months installment. We go on the ground. I went also, for example, directly on ground. This was a cooperative of farmers in Beni Suef. And from that meetings, we came out with a product that imply 6 months grace period, 3 years of duration with installments that are lower during the summer because the production, this is for the milk production, is lower in summer than. So the point and we have even an insurance on the cow that is purchased through this. The point is that we need to operate in order to prevent that our customers can default. And this is for the good of the customer, but of course, at the end, is for the good of the bank. So this is an example of the way we conduct business. Another point that we have addressed, and sometimes also going against the market. Sometimes it's not easy to affirm a certain practice, but we do because we firmly believe that this is correct. For example, when I arrived, I was surprised that the entire retail market was on fixed rate. I learned that personal loans in Egypt can last 10, 12 years, 8 years, fixed rate. In that period, with so high rate, we were lending at 22, 23%. So I asked myself, what happened when definitely the macroeconomic reform will come into effect and the interest rate finally will go down? These people will be stuck with this rate for many years. So we launched the variable rate loan, but before doing that, we had to acquire also our resources at variable rate. So we launched 3 years variable rate CDs. And this was a critical moment because we had to train our people to properly sell this product because we had to inform our customer. And after the first months, we had a full recall of all the customers that purchased this product. There were 3,000. 90 gave responses that gave us the impression that they didn't understood properly what they did. Were sent back to the branch, and at the end, only 3 reversed their transaction. Based on that, we have launched our variable loan product, and our customers that have chosen this in the last couple of years have enjoyed a steady decrease of their installment. And I think this is extremely important because this is a way you transmit to the people the benefit of the improvement of the economic situation. So definitely when we start this, and also today sometimes we have difficulties, but we strongly believe that this is for the good of our customers, and at the end is also for the good of the bank, because we believe in long-term relationship. This is something on ground of what we have done.
This timer is really stressful, huh? It's like performance under pressure. But anyway, yeah, right. The next speaker is Morgan Simon. Now, Morgan is going to tell us about impact investment. There are lots of confusion about the concept. She's going to tell us more about impact investment. Morgan.
Assalamu alaikum. It's good to be here. So Morgan Simon, coming from California. I've been doing impact investing for about 18 years. And for the past 7 as co-founder of a registered investment advisor that deploys about $30 million a year into private companies, both debt and equity and direct companies and funds. Wanted to just provide a bit of insight of how impact investment occurred, how it fits within really a global concept of how we think about flows of money, social change, and business together. And what's interesting to me, the actual origin of social investing goes all the way back to the 1600s. And like most things in the world, traces back to Africa, in that there was the Quaker religious order in the US that refused to profit from the transatlantic slave trade. So they wouldn't invest in any companies that were involved in slavery. They wouldn't even consume sugar, right, which was grown on the plantations in the South. Instead, they'd use maple syrup from the North as their preferred sweetener. But they really kind of started that idea within religious orders of saying, we don't want to invest in things that we consider to be sins, what nowadays is called the sin stocks, right? So things like tobacco, alcohol, and firearms. And over hundreds of years, and kind of keeping that commitment, started to really expand to what we might say are the modern day sins of polluting our environment, of treating people poorly, right, of the different corporate sins that we tend to see in the world. And that evolved into what people sometimes call ESG, environment, social, and governance, which is often about screening out bad companies and trying to improve corporate practices in the public markets. And then corporate social responsibility, which was often identifying what is the nexus point, kind of as you were saying, of what's best for the customer and for the bank in the long term, is to ensure the customer's welfare. And that too often we see, for instance, fossil fuel companies that will say, well, we only have 8 years left of reserves, but most people are trying to retire in 20 or 30. So how do you deal with that fundamental mismatch and essentially make the sorts of corporate reforms that are going to ensure that we not only have a planet, but that we have profit, right? So you wind up with that really strong alignment. And that has led to the further innovation through impact investment, the idea of not just screening out the bad, but really focusing on the good, of how do we help to finance the next generation of companies that are fundamentally structured around the idea that we need to support people and the planet in order to have successful businesses, in order to have a successful future. And then from the investor's perspective, to really think more comprehensively about legacy. That when we think about investing and investing's purpose, we invest because we want more money, essentially, right? But money is a proxy for value. Always has been, right? That it's pieces of paper that we inscribe with societal value because of what it's able to achieve. And we're often thinking, for instance, about a future for our families, for our companies, and if we build that wealth in a way that is destructive to others, that's often not the type of legacy that we want. So impact investment to me is about how do we invest in companies with social and environmental purpose in a way that cements our legacy in a positive light. And I think fits very clearly as well when we talk about philanthropy or ways that other ways that people try to cement their place into history. And as Anand Giridharadas wrote in his book, Winners Take All, rather than just focusing on giving back, we need to stop taking, right? And that businesses too often are taking out of society rather than thinking about how can we be responsible corporate actors in everything that we do. So impact investment, the name itself was really a marketing campaign in 2008 that the Rockefeller Foundation said, there's this new concept, we have to figure out what are we going to call this, right? And how do we make sure we're calling it this consistently? And over the past 10 years, you've seen billions of dollars flowing into the sector, which has been very exciting, a couple of billion-dollar funds now out in the universe. And it means that we've proven some very important pieces around impact investment, particularly on the finance side, that we've been able to prove that it absolutely can be market rate, right? That you can make just as much money, if not more, by investing in sustainable companies. And that we've seen, whether Harvard Business Review or Deutsche Bank, like very mainstream institutions doing long-term studies that find when you treat people and the planet well, it benefits everyone and profits increase. That actually companies, one Harvard study over 30 years, companies had 3 times the market capitalization. So really dramatic increases based on their social environmental ethics. And then second, there was the question with impact investment, well, is this just an asset class, or is this an approach that you can actually take across the portfolio? And that's where, in our practice as registered investment advisors, and we're working with portfolios often in the $100 million to $400 million range, where we absolutely are converting full portfolios from cash to bonds to public equity to private equity to real estate, that there are options across all of these asset classes to do it. So essentially, there's no excuse anymore that if you want that sort of legacy of saying, I generated wealth and I did it in a way that supported society, that you can do that, that the options are out there, which has been very exciting. And what I would posit, that means since we've solved a lot of the financial questions, how do we make sure that we catch up on the social side? How do we make sure that the impact is really going to make a difference? Because the Merriam-Webster, kind of the dictionary definition of impact is to impinge upon, especially forcefully. And that can be good or bad, right, depending on how that is executed. And going back to thinking about in a business school environment, the importance of making sure that the conversation about social business isn't just in the business school, but that there's crossovers with anthropology, with community development, with economic development, with all these different perspectives that become so critical in making sure that we're able to do this work effectively. And additionally with that, its role in innovation, right? There's a number of business schools across the world that have started impact investment funds, often raising resources from alumni, and providing that practical experience of how do we both incentivize social entrepreneurship, so whether that's prizes or competitions, or providing students with that concrete opportunity to learn what it's like to be a venture investor, to see what's the type of support that you need to provide a company, and really bringing those skills that they're gaining outside of the university walls, and building that long-term network, both on the side of entrepreneurs and investors. So I'm going to avoid the time pressure and cede my last 2.5 minutes. But thanks, everyone. I look forward to discussing more.
I'm going to use your 2 minutes for the benefit of the community. So, okay, my next speaker is Mckay. Noha is the Ford Foundation Regional Director. Many people do not understand that philanthropy has a major role in promoting and fermenting responsible business practices. Noha?
Thank you, Dr. Ali, and I'm so happy that I have a 2-minute extra to use if I have to, because I'm down with a cold and it has affected my voice. I'm slightly better, so I'm not distributing bacteria or virus anymore, but my voice has terribly been damaged in the past 2 days. So I apologize for that, and I thank AUC and the Business School for this fantastic invitation for me to learn from such an incredibly distinguished panel. To make a long story short, I want to give an example from how philanthropy moves from giving to structural changes for more social justice. And the example will be the Ford Foundation, which many of you in this room probably would know as a giver of grants to promote research and academic excellence, as we have been in this region for over 55 years now, continuously. And AUC has been one of our great partners in academic excellence and research through grants. Few of you would know that the Ford Foundation has another face to it, which has evolved over time, and that's the story I want to tell you today, because it fits very nicely with what Morgan has said and what our esteemed guest, CEO Alex Bank, has also said, and I'm sure it will also fit with Rada's intervention. To situate the Ford Foundation in the US, I need to tell you just a couple of data points. Total giving in the United States is estimated to be around $400 billion a year, and that constitutes around 2% of GDP in the USA. 70% of that, 400 billion, is individuals giving, and only 16% are foundations giving, okay? So I'm coming here to speak with a very humble voice, because we are only 16% of the $400 billion of giving every year inside the United States. We, meaning we, the foundations as a whole. The Ford Foundation is a much smaller part of all of this. The total number of foundations in the US is 100,000. 100,000 foundations in the US that collectively give about $58 billion a year in grants, whereas their actual asset, those 100,000, is $800 billion. That's the asset value, but they give 58 billion in grants per year. Within that context, we come as one of the top 10 foundations inside the United States. And we have done it the way many others have been doing over the last 100 years, which is according to the law by which the foundation is registered in the United States as a private, non-profit foundation. You invest 95% of your assets, and you can give at least 5% of your asset into grants. Grants that are never paid back, as you all know. We've been doing it that way for many decades, just like everybody else. Our assets are $13 billion, and we give 5%, sometimes 5.5, 5.6 a year, of that into grants. Most of our grants, by the way, for some of you who might not know this, and I always like to say it, most of our grants, actually 2/3, are given inside the United States to fight social justice issues in the United States, to fight inequality inside the United States. And only 1/3 of our grants go to 10 offices in Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, North Africa, and Asia. So we are a small player, if you look at those numbers critically, but we want to set some, not the example, but produce some models for learning that we learn from and others learn from. In 1968, the foundation received a ruling from the US government that allowed us to release loans, guarantees, and equities directly aligned with our social justice mission. Those were part of the 5% that we can use to give grants. And since 1968, we directed $670 million in support of social entrepreneurs and community efforts in affordable housing, arts and culture, and financial inclusion. The great shift happened around the 1980s, and Morgan mentioned that or alluded to it. The great shift happened when there was a global demand to divest from things that harm the world. And you may all remember, some of you at least may, that during that time we had huge global divestment campaigns against tobacco, against fossil fuel, and the apartheid regime in South Africa. All this prepared the world to do no harm. And that prepared for the next wave that I want to focus on, which started much, much later, which is not only to do no harm, but to start to do more good and structural good. Structural good. I think I need to underline this and talk about it later. In 2017, as a result of that, we committed using $1 billion of the Ford Foundation's assets in double bottom line investments, not grants, investments. And that will continue during 10 years. Until now, we have given 13% of the $1 billion to 10 fund managers. Are we alone in doing that? No, we are not. We have other big foundations in the US who are equally interested in using their assets to go beyond giving grants and start to influence the investment world in the direction that Morgan has explained to you, which is financial return, yes, but with a lot of social and environmental return as well. You have the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, you have the Kellogg Foundation, you have MacArthur and Bill and Melinda Gates, among many others. All of them are going in that direction. What has kept us from doing that so far, and this is a point I will make now, and maybe all details can come later in the discussion. What has kept the foundations of the world, or particularly in the United States, from getting to that point so far? Three main reasons I would like to mention to you. First, government regulations. The regulatory framework is very important to incentivize, and we can talk about that more later. Number two, let's not forget that private money is not only controlled by those who made that money. In many cases, if this money ends up in foundations, those foundations are controlled by boards of trustees. And in many instances, the boards of trustees understand their fiduciary responsibility to be keep it safe, play it safe, use the 5% according to the law, and give grants, and that's it. And finally, measurement tools. How do you measure the impact that you're making, especially in the social and the environmental field? All these are things that you should take into account before we run and jump into, okay, we want to do it. We want to do it too. But in the final analysis, I'll stop here in a second. Let's all think about doing it. Let's get our graduates from the business school of AUC who will become either startups or fund managers or entrepreneurs, big and small in their own right, to start to think about innovative ways of using their money to make profit, for sure. The world doesn't go around without it, but to make it at a high social and a high environmental impact. That is something that the Ford Foundation wants to engage with other regions on in order to raise awareness and contribute to building an ecosystem for socially and environmentally sensitive, good business. Thank you.
Thank you, Noah. Ford Foundation is one of the major sponsors of the Gerhard Center. So this is a very strong tie with the American University. Another comment, Ford Foundation, the structure of the MBA program, the current structure is actually a 1960s project of the Ford Foundation. Now, my next speaker is Hashim Dandarawi. Hashim is going to tell us about how a community would take its own destiny in its own hands in a way of offering business-driven initiatives for the benefit of its own people. This is an excellent example of democratizing economy or democratizing business, sort of say. Hashim.
First of all, good morning, and I apologize for the delay. My name is Hashim Dandarawi. I come from a very small village in Upper Egypt, Kenya. I am a president of a Team 4 security company. After I graduated from school, we're very much linked into our roots. Upper Egypt is basically a tribal society. And given the fact that my parents assumed a tribal role, by default, I was prepared to take a lead. Our tribal system allows me to have the chance to be on the leadership side. And this leadership is not an open invitation or an open carte blanche, but actually every year this leadership is renewed, and it is a matter of the people whether they accept it or not. Based on that, I'm coming from a village that is quite rich in the human capital. We are around 100,000 individuals. And on the tribal side, we're overall 260,000. So these are the people that we are responsible of. On the other hand, the lack of opportunity is one of the biggest challenges. Usually rural villages don't have much opportunities in abundance. So what we were faced with is lack of opportunity in addition to a very rising number of violence actions. The tribal system has its own ideas. So we started with an initiative called Dandara Cultural Center. It's an NGO. Basically, we had to look inside, not outside. We weren't equipped to have to write proposals and get funding, so we needed to have something that is very basic and very simple. We started with the most important thing is education. We can't build schools, we can't build nurseries. So what we do is that we have a nursery program whereby I go to the big leader. I tell him, okay, you have 2 wives and 2 houses. Give us 1 house. We'll make your wife or we'll make your daughter the Nazra, the person who is in charge of the school, provided that we give her training. And we try to drum up the money from the society, from the community. Basically, we're talking about £30,000, some chairs, some toys. And we invest heavily in the curriculum. We're not from educational background, so what I do is that I see who's from our tribe that is living in France, Netherlands, the States, and he has to come or she has to come to help us build this curriculum. Actually, it took us some time. We were able to build this nurseries. We're now around 15 nursery, and it's self-sustained. At the beginning, everybody was benevolent. Then we started giving salaries. So this is basically what we did on the side of education. We moved to a different development project, which was also a very simple, straightforward, was pickling. And the pickling was, we import our pickles from Cairo. And I mean it. We have everything, and we get the pickles from Cairo. So basically, what we did is to identify some of the community, young men and women, who want to be leaders, and they want to shine. We have this pride thing in Upper Egyptians, so everybody wants to shine. We give them the chance, and they lead. Everybody is really committed into doing what he does in the best possible way, so it reflects back on him and on his family and on his tribe. So it's a win-win situation. So we started up with one unit. I personally financed the first unit. They paid back the money after 5 years because we had a lot of problems. After 5 years, it was basically breaking even. And we took this model and we duplicated it in several villages. It's very difficult to build a factory. It's very difficult to get in finance because we don't want to go into the cycle of loans and loan repayment, and they might default. So what we do is that basically we go in and have one centralized unit for pickling, and we came up with a very nice model that basically employs women. So we tell the women in the house, we give you 2 barrels, and we teach you how to pickle. And one woman is in charge of 5-6 houses, and she's in charge of quality control. At the end of the season, we collect all these barrels. Now the production, instead of having one unit that produces 10 tons per month, we've reached 150 tons per month. Simply, women are doing their own pickling in the house. We collect the pickles, and we process them finally at the facility, and we try to distribute them. The beauty of it is that each woman felt that she's in charge of her own financing, and I made her a rule that if you want to contribute, this money is for you. Not for the house, not for the husband, not for the kids. Maybe you want to buy a perfume, maybe you want to buy a dress, this is yours. If you give it to the kids, if you give it to the house, then you're not allowed to participate. So that gives them a chance to really feel that they make their own money and it's not like living in the circle of life. We train the young men and women. The women are working as accountants and working as part of the production facility. The young men are working in distribution. They went in, each one, he goes to the finding finance for a tuk-tuk or something, and he distributes. And this way we had the value chain completed, from the farmers up to the young men and women contributing in this facility. The idea of success is very simple. We don't look out for the things that we don't have. We look inside of what we have, and we make the best out of it. Maybe it's not the best outcome, but after time, we develop resilience, and we develop the ability to survive. What my experience has shown is that when you empower the men and women, you give them responsibility, you give them a feeling of purpose, they shine, and they make a story successful. I cannot get any credit for the success, but the only credit I get is that I can call Dr. Sharif and tell him, come and lecture us, and I call a friend of mine and say, come and give us an idea about marketing, come give us this design, help us in putting the accounting system, and everybody wants to help. So I was fortunate to be able to be surrounded by people that are really want to make a difference. We do not want to say we have a problem, we cannot do this, cannot do that. It's a vicious circle. What we do is that we need to achieve and we need to get empowered, and we are going to do it. It doesn't matter if it's 5 years, 20 years. At the end of the day, today is better than yesterday, and tomorrow is hopefully much better than today. So basically, this is the model that we have now been successful in duplicating. We've been doing this for the past 30 years. We'd like to be under the radar because I think this is who we are. The individual that was successful is successful in different ventures. He's successful in my company. Actually, my company employs all sides, from the accounting to the guards to the trainers. And those of you who have dogs, they might have heard about East Wind. It's also a Saidi community. Everybody is Saidi. So I would want to always stress that given the opportunity, any individual is able and capable of changing his destiny and his life. And what our job is to simply, what we do is to unlocking the potential of this house. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hashim. I just want to comment, I mean, the first time I went and I saw their KG, this is an excellent example of what we call a frugal innovation. How do you innovate? So you deliver a service in a very cheap way. And I heard the cost per year is about 700 Egyptian pounds. Now, the first time I went there, I mean, I used to live in Northern Virginia. I mean, I went back home and I was telling my wife, this is exactly the same spirit like a KG in Northern Virginia. I mean, the only difference is that it's a cheap rural house. The furniture is cheap. The toys, they actually make them cheap. The only thing that is exactly the same is the spirit and is the curriculum and is the way they teach. This is fantastic. I mean, every time I go there also, when you talk to the people involved with the entrepreneurship that they have, this is really a community taking its own faith in their hand, and they're using commerce or business as a mean to achieve things. Business is the way to develop, to create money, right? And you need money to pay for other things. They realize that. This is an excellent example of democratizing business. Now we're going to start I'm going to start with Ziad. Now each one would have 4 minutes. You can comment on any of the comments or if you have other ideas from your experiences, but we're just going to keep it around the topics we agreed on. Ziad, please.
Happy to be here today in my old school with such a lovely crowd. A couple of comments on Dante's point regarding the supporting agriculture, and at the same time Hashim's point on the pickling. I happen to be sitting on a lovely company's board, Plantform. Plantform started as a platform for plants, that's how they think about it, with a huge contract farming operation. More than 400 peasants planting peppers, different type of peppers, that are 100% pickled and exported to the US. So I mean, this is one thing definitely we can collaborate on, since all of the operation is running for export. Maybe we can help with that as well. So Dandara turns from being not only a producer of pickle and distributing locally, but who knows, maybe one day your products can be in US supermarkets and groceries. The other point, actually, the model that Dante talked about, which is a more appropriate lending for the peasants, I think is a fantastic thing. In what you said, I admire very much the ability to think of the mode of operation of the customer and getting closer to that. Given that it's in Beni Suef, which is the same location that we are located in, is also very interesting because Said definitely, Upper Egypt, really needs the support of operations like the one you're funding or the one that Hashim is running. I personally started a project in 2019. I think this will be my last entrepreneurial venture. at my age, I think I don't have the energy to do much more. But this is a big one. I called it the 2043 project. 2043 is a random date in the future, and I'm hoping to help businesses and individuals do businesses that are compliant with the future, or help at least preserve the world we live in, and contribute positively to the environment and to the well-being of less privileged people. Platform is one company we support, which is really dealing with a lot of peasants, mostly in Upper Egypt. Another area we are focused on in Peacock Power, which is a company that we created in 2019 also, is water and renewable energy. We're supporting another great company, Solarize Egypt, to build 10 projects, solar energy projects. And right now we're in the building the third power station for solar energy. Yeah, you're financing that as well. I mean, we just signed an agreement. And by the way, you are financing Platform. They just signed an agreement as well. So I think I can attest to Alex Bank good work in this area, and many more companies I hope to see in the next few years that are really making a difference. The world we live in is becoming much more and more difficult, and we need more creativity and more people with conscious to protect this world we live in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Hani Mahmoud. I'm the consultant to the Prime Minister for government reform, but also I'm the chairman of Vodafone Egypt. And in 4 minutes, what I'm going to cover actually what kind of change we did in Vodafone Egypt regarding our what we call CSR activity and strategy. So 2 big changes happened in the last couple of years. Number one, we removed the S. So we're talking now about corporate responsibility, not corporate social responsibility. So, and this is the trend all over the world now, that it's much bigger and much wider to talk about corporate responsibility in general and not corporate social responsibility. Because the word social, when it comes to people's mind, it's giving money or helping poor people and things like that, which is not at all the corporate responsibility objective. The second big change that we did in our strategy, in our corporate responsibility strategy, is from being very shy of using our products and services in corporate responsibility to, no, this is our strength. We are going to use our products and services to help people and to help the community. So in the past, it was almost عيب, and it's almost wrong to use your products because you are mixing between marketing and corporate responsibility. But the new trend that we are working on now is no, this is our strength, we need to use it. And when we put corporate responsibility, we put 3 pillars underneath to work on it. The first pillar is economical, and then social and environment. Those are the 3 pillars, the main 3 pillars that we are working on in corporate responsibility. And because of time, I'm going to give one example for each pillar from the 3 main pillars that we are working on. If we are talking about social, we are focusing, among other things, on women empowerment. And the reason why I chose this, when I found majority of women in this room today, so I think you will like it. So what we did for women empowerment, actually we didn't have a nursery. We established a very modern nursery for our women. We had, and Ziad knows that, we had a supermarket not only selling to people biscuits and soft drinks, but also women can go in the morning and give them the shopping list that they want. It's Alpha Market. And they bring it from the main store, and 3 o'clock, it's ready for her to take it home. So there is no need for her to go to the supermarket after a long working day. Also, what we did when we started the nursery, we did a callback campaign for all women who left the company because they have children and they cannot work without having a nursery nearby. So when we established the nursery, we had a callback campaign for all of them, telling them, if you want to come back, let us know so we try to find you a new job in the new environment. 50% of our management team. We measure the percentage of women in management because it's easy to have a call center full of women, but the real empowerment for women, what is the percentage of women in management? So our top team, the EXCO, 50% women, 4 out of 8 are female, including the finance director. She is a female, which is not very normal. However, she proved that the women can really control finance better than men. And anyway, the second pillar, because of time, is economic. And then we are using our products and services in this direction. So Vodafone Cash is helping people a lot in the economic situation, and also smart cities and IoT, or Internet of Things. The last pillar is environment, and the big project that we are building a big solar energy farm in Aswan, and this will be linked to the electricity network for Egypt, and they will get money out of it to really fund environment projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Dalia?
Thank you so much. I'm Dalia Abdel-Eder, and I've been working in the financial industry ever since I graduated before Christ. And I'm currently head of Sustainable Development Committee at the Federation of Egyptian Banks. My comment naturally relates to the financial industry and builds on what Dante and Morgan have commented. And I will build on Noha's word of structural. Structural, what we need is a structural change. And here I want to bring to our discussion a new announcement, not any relatively new announcement, is that for the first time in history, the banking industry worldwide launched responsible banking principles. That was last September in New York, 2019. And it was launched by 28 international banks under the auspices of the United Nations Environmental Programme for Financial Institutions. And I have the honor and pleasure to represent one of the founding banks, which was Arab African International Bank. When I was there, I resigned a couple of months ago. And we have the CIB. So we have, from the MENA region, only 2 banks that participated with 26 other international banks to launch responsible banking principles. The value of these principles are not only that they were going to structurally impact banks, how we operate, because it's not about initiatives. We have to move from the realm of initiatives and programs and projects to getting the ESG integrated and ingrained into our policies, into our cultures, procedures, how we breathe, how we make every pound, how we generate our revenues, how we manage our risks. So this is the essence of these principles. There are 6 principles. They have to do with alignment, strategic alignment. They have to do with the strategy development, how we deal with our clients. And this relates to what Dante just mentioned. It's not about know your client, you know, like Wakil Niyaba investigating our clients. It's how about empowering our clients to understand how they can grow by integrating the ESG. So it's a new relationship, setting a new parameters between banks and clients. So the value of these principles is that they can spill over other sectors in the economy and scale and drive the structural change, not only within the financial industry, but with all other industries, because we bankroll all projects. So prior to lending you, when I tell you that you have to abide by environmental, social, governance issues, and this is conditional. It's not only the credit risk that we talk about, it's about environmental and social risk. So you can imagine the speed by which we transform the economy into sustainable. So the responsible banking principles, also Alex Bank joined. So we have 5 banks in Egypt that joined. I have been mandated to advance the principles all over the MENA region. But what I'm concerned about in this roundtable, okay, we'll take care of the banking sector, hopefully, but getting the business cool. I mean, responsible business is one of the pillars of the AUC, and we're talking about responsible banking principles. And I think I would recommend that the principles become part of the educational curriculum, whether for undergraduates, graduates, or executive education, because actually, if you do not get it into the educational realm, becomes very difficult to talk to CEOs 30 years, 40 years after they graduate, after you teach them credit risk and the P&L, and you come and tell them, you know what, it's the environmental and social. It becomes very, very, very difficult. And I would really appreciate a couple of CEOs, Dent is one of them, and so is CIB and Arab African International Bank at one point of time. Few CEOs would have the vision and the daringness, being bold to accept the environmental, social, and governance aspects within their business, not like cosmetics thing as a CSR. So
G is
if
for
we
governance,
get it-
right?
Huh?
We're out of time.
Khalas, I'm done. So that's it. Get it into education.
Thank you, Dali. Dan.
Well, it looks like I sat in the right spot because I'm going to pick up where Dahlia left off, and that is that you'll see that I'm not on the list. I crashed this roundtable with permission, and partly because some of my work has been with business schools over many, many years. And I was involved initially with the development of the Principles for Responsible Management Education, which is an initiative of the UN Global Compact. And much of that work is indeed exactly what you described, to try to, how do we get business schools to not only teach principles that are consistent with responsible business, but how do we get them to take a lead role in driving responsible business? I was with an organization that accredits business schools for about 19 years, but a year ago I left to work for an organization called the Global Business School Network. It's a network of a little more than 100 really good business schools, including AUC, but also MIT and INSEAD and FDC in Brazil and many schools throughout Southeast Asia and throughout Africa. And we were started about 17 years ago to help improve access to management education for the developing world. In other words, we're started for SDG number 4 before SDG number 4 was in existence. And the reason why I'm so interested in this panel and listening to this is because it's not just what we do in one school. One school can make a huge difference in a region, even globally, but it's how do we connect schools in a way that creates even more value and helps drive change more effectively? So, for example, can we deploy students in teams in a different way across schools, even across disciplines, in a way that helps improve the prospects for social ventures, to make them more bankable more quickly, help them to grow across a region or a continent or globally. And it's those kinds of things, like connecting students across schools, connecting faculty to do research projects that create new opportunities. That's the kind of things that the Global Business School Network is doing. And I'm just so curious to hear more about how the business sector, what kinds of challenges they face, and to understand what kinds of direct roles business schools can play in doing that. Not just how we educate students, not just to do research that has a long-term implication, but how do we deploy such smart people and ambitious people in a way that creates more value for the world.
You have 50 minutes or so.
You can have it. You guys can split it.
Yeah. So my name is Magid Azzeddin. I'm the PwC Egypt senior partner. And we at PwC serve clients and communities around the world, working to achieve our purpose, which is we build trust in society and help solve important problems. That's the core of our purpose. So responsible business is one of the 4 pillars of PwC Global Corporate Responsibility Strategy. It's one of the 4 principles. Where we focus on people, we do focus on profit as well, and planet. So mainly people and planet, and of course where profit is important. We do that through the following. Realizing the potential of our people. So we start with the first thing, women. So diversity and inclusion program. At our board in the Middle East, we have a diversity seat. We also focus on upskilling program for our staff. So kind of teaching them the new technological skill sets that be relevant in the work community and employ more as opposed to cut jobs. We call it responsible technology. We work with clients. We do provide sustainability reporting services. We also work with our suppliers as well for a positive change. So we at PwC, we expect the same level of integrity and business conduct from our third party and their personnel, as we do with our people. So we make sure that we are associated only with suppliers that have the same values like us. We also do focus on the social impact we have on our own communities. So through our CR initiatives and volunteering programs we have in Egypt and globally. Environmental stewardship. We have a program that offset our air travel. So greenhouse gases emissions, GHG, the footprint, so the amount of travel that partners and staff do every year, we give back to the community, we invest in renewable energy and other projects to counter that. There's another interesting thing. I'm sure you all watch Netflix series. So trying to raise awareness, we contributed to the corporate edition of the Netflix series, Our Planet, Our Business. You really have to watch it. It's interesting. It's like less than 30 minutes, and you can find it on YouTube. You don't have to pay for Netflix to see it. Our Planet, Our Business. Very interesting. PwC globally is committing to UN Global Compact. We're proud to have been a signatory to the UN Global Compact since 2002. And we're deeply committed to its mission to support companies to operate responsibility in line with the 10 principles. To take strategic action in advancing the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Quickly, our work with business school and education entities. So for example, we do work with the AUC. So we do corporate governance simulation, where we get staff to play the role, and we're the judges, and we even give awards like internship and stuff like that. We do the CFA competition and talks about the family business. So we do those three. Impact investment, quickly, we collaborate with Nexus, and we also support social entrepreneurs. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ahmed Isa. I'm the Chief Executive of the Retail Bank at CIB, which is an Egyptian commercial bank based here in Egypt. Little over a decade ago, our board, our chairman had a vision actually taking the ESG, what is now called the ESG actually, very early on to our shareholders, and seeking approval and actually granting approval, I think more than 13, 14 years ago, on granting 1.5% of the bank's profitability each year, pledging it to the well-being of our communities through the CIB Foundation. That pledge today is approximately worth 2 billion Egyptian pounds in today's money term, because the market capitalization of CIB today is more than 120 billion Egyptian pounds. So allocating or forfeiting 1.5% of the profitability means that we're forfeiting the return on about 2 billion Egyptian pounds today. Each year, or actually this year, I'll talk about this year, our shareholders are meeting in few weeks. They are going to vote on approving the distribution of profit account at CIB, and that will mean more than 177 million Egyptian pounds will go into the foundation and will be allocated to being spent on the foundation. The foundation objective or the mandate is solely directed towards children health and children education. So that brings me to what I want to raise actually with such a strong education organization, Egypt. What we're seeing across our work with the foundation, which is, by the way, managed by a fully independent board, the majority of the board members are the board of trustees, and all the management of the foundation are independent from the executive management of CIB. More than 90% of what we spend through the foundation is spent on children health. We're finding it very difficult to find good education opportunities for children in Egypt to allocate budgets to. The second thing I want to raise to the AUC to consider while actually thinking about ESG and responsible capitalism is the building of capacity across the foundations and NGOs in Egypt. We've found that the ability to write proposals and to measure and manage impact across Egypt's NGOs and foundations requires significant development. The third thing I would probably raise for the consideration of for the AUC is how ESG is embedded into policies. The prime responsibility of any management team in any corporate should still remain the maximization of shareholders' value in the context of maximizing stakeholder interests. While management are pursuing that interest, there should be more policy advancement towards ESG. So while they are maximizing the shareholders of the interest, they are also maximizing the interests of the shareholders. And I think this is an area where maybe more work needs to be done in the policy framework in Egypt and across the educational organizations in Egypt. I'll stop here in the interest of time. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. I strongly commend what you guys are doing, and please keep doing that.
Hello, thank you for inviting me to this discussion. It's an absolute learning journey for me. So I am the founder of a company called eConsult. eConsult was founded a year after 2011 in a very challenging time to start a company. I'm an architect, and I started looking at what is the reason withholding Egypt from having green buildings and buildings that save energy and water, and why we're not heading into this direction. And the business was started by thinking out what are the barriers, and we discovered that the barriers were absolutely massive. So we started a building, and we started a business that had very, very large ambitions. A business that didn't have a market in Egypt. There was no market for this. We had very little assistance at the start of the business because everyone was saying green buildings in Egypt right now, good luck. But luckily, luck was on our side because the environmental aspect of what we do is at the core and the structure of this kind of business that we do, which is very different, which is, I believe, the future of entrepreneurship. So for the longest time, we were seen as an NGO, because if you do green stuff, you're seen as an NGO, and we're not. We want to make profit, and we were able to make profit by having a green business model. Currently on our portfolio right now, we have become the highest certified green business, globally certified green business and green building designers in Egypt. And we're also moving into the first carbon neutral commercial and residential sector buildings in the region. So what does this mean? It means that there is so much opportunity in Egypt to harness climate action and to harness environmental actions within the business sector. Our clients are the largest business corporations in Egypt, albeit banks are our largest clients. Our clients are not just the multinationals, they're local businesses really trying to harness the portfolio of energy saving and water saving, which are two aspects in Egypt that have to come into realization. What are businesses doing about water and what are businesses doing about energy? A couple of years ago, our fortunes turned and our business grew because suddenly we had the removal of energy subsidies. And that made a commodity that we were working to save have a completely different pricing strategy. This was critical for us, and I think we're about to move into this realm when it comes to water. So there are exciting opportunities to work with here. What I would really love from a business school to help us into this sector is, the first thing is to enable students to understand, and I consider myself a continuous student. Running a business means that you have to be very manual and also adapt at the same time, especially in the region. We have a lot of changes happening in the region right now. We have social, structural changes, political changes, policy changes, climate and environmental changes, that graduating from a classical business school doesn't really allow you to have that flexibility. And like I said, our business model entirely changed when the removal of subsidies changed for energy. We started really thinking, how do we do business here? What are the opportunities? Now we've opened a new department that makes furniture out of scrap waste, because we do have a waste issue in Egypt. So what I'm saying is, there are interesting types of businesses that are going to come out, and in business schools, it's an opportunity to realize that you can be the platform to educate these new kinds of business that address the future challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ali, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Pasant Fouad. I'm heading the External Communication Department for Juhayna. For the foreigners in the room, Juhayna is a leading dairy company. It's 35 years old. Like Dr. Ali says, it's the Danone of Egypt. Well, I've heard a lot of keywords in the room that were music to my ear, like CSV, and we share the same philosophy, impact investment, women empowerment, a lot of keywords that really, really makes me happy that the business community is on the same wavelength. We're all speaking the same language, which is something really important. Dalia is saying it's very difficult to educate CEOs, and I totally agree with you. It's very difficult to start teaching CEOs corporate social responsibility or sustainability or doing good. But I have to say I'm very lucky that I work at a company whose chairman actually believes in doing good from day one. For those of you who don't know Egypt, again, or don't live in Egypt, there's a very famous place called Juhayna Square. It's a square that was built because there was actually a need in the community. It's an area where you have a lot of intersections. There used to happen a lot of accidents over there, and it's actually the way to our factory. So our chairman, back in the 80s, said, okay, I'm gonna do this square, I'm gonna build it, I'm gonna maintain it, just doing good for the community. My employees take this road every day. This is where our factory is located. We cannot leave this road as is. So doing good has been in the DNA of the company since day one, and I'm very, very lucky to work in a company with such management. Like everything else, doing good has evolved in Juhayna, from doing simple, like small acts of philanthropy to CSR to now we share the same logic of creating shared value. So to ensure sustainability, what we're doing is we're looking at opportunities in the communities we operate in, and we try to see how we can actually have a positive impact on this community while we're also helping our business to ensure sustainability. So I'll give you a very quick example of what we do with the dairy farmers. We have our own farm, but it only supplies around 10 to 15% of our need of milk, and we work with 120 other dairy farms. So we've created a department inside Juhayna to take care of those farms, to develop those farms. We visit them on a regular basis, give them technical training, give them even funds. We develop the infrastructure of the farms. So we actually, this means better quality of milk, more milk for us. It impacts our bottom line, no brainer. And it's also helping the community of farmers, of dairy farmers. We're buying the milk at a higher price. We're elevating the social standard of the farmers we deal with. And this has been a very, very successful project inside Johan. So this is the mindset we're operating with. Again, I agree with Ahmed on what he said of, we call on AUC and other business schools for building capacity within the companies and for also embedding this responsible business practices within the curriculum, because if there's a challenge that we're facing as business or as businesses, it's the gap between what we study in school and what the market actually needs. We were debating where the sustainability actually lies in different companies. Is it with the PR? Is it with the communication? Is it with the public affairs? But now we see, for instance, a pressing need for a sustainability manager, a separate department within the companies. Do they study this at schools? Are they prepared for the companies? We have to build the capacity on the job, and this is something that I think the business school should look at. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for inviting me. My name is Hiba Fadil. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Social Enterprise Academy in Egypt, which recently we officially launched this week, actually. So I would like to comment on how we can engage our students, not only from the School of Business, but from all schools within our community. I agree very much with Dalia, also Dan, about that it's very important to embed these values in the educational system from the beginning. So I believe that there's a big role that the corporations and organizations should have with the university in helping to fund programs that would enable students to get immersed in the different community problems, not just through a course or an internship, but more on a long-term basis or a long-term program that they should be working on. I think that the students should take ownership and come up with innovative solutions, for example, such as the model that Mr. Heshim was talking to us about. So I think that they should work on such issues in a practical way, which would help them sort of develop and change the way they think and their beliefs. There should be programs that bring about this kind of transformational change that changes the mindset of the students. This would actually enable them to become more civic-minded, and this is the base of being a responsible citizen from the first place. So if they're a responsible citizen, eventually they become a responsible business owner. That's it. Thank you. I think you have more time now. Thank you.
If I may ask Nazia to comment, because she's also social enterprise, so it complements with her.
Thank you so much. I'm Nazia from Social Enterprise Academy International. So as Heba alluded, we've just launched our Egypt offices here, and I'm learning a lot about Egypt on this visit. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's been fantastic hearing from so many of you. One of the things that I've definitely taken away from this experience in the business school, I was listening to a speech that Dr. Sharif gave on Sunday at the opening. And one of the things you alluded to there was what we want are mindset graduates. Graduates that have the mindset to solve problems. And a lot of people around this table have actually spoken and touched on education in some way. Mr. Hashim, actually, who has just left, I think he's a great example of how someone embeds and begins with education in a community, brings in enterprise, and actually creates a huge cultural shift and moves towards a much more purposeful approach. Dalia mentioned challenges that individuals have. We have purpose-driven individuals who are working in organizations that are not always receptive to the requests and the interests that you want to push and you want to achieve. And I think it's a fact, and I think it's great to hear that acknowledged in this circle, because actually outside of these doors, we all have boards to answer to, and we all have, there are various focuses that we are stretched and pulled against. One of the things that I would ask is, this question of responsible business links to the question of responsible leadership. And so how do we support the journey of a student through the business school to graduation to CEO? How do we embed the practices and the values, and how do we say that actually there is value in something beyond pound and pence. And that value can be a social value, it can be linked to climate change, it can be linked to any of the SDGs. But those are actually some really critical factors. A lot of that is linked to integrity and linked to character. And what I see around me at this table here is people who have integrity and who have character and who understand exactly what they stand for. The process of embedding that into our teaching and creating space for it in our companies, it's the marriage of both that will allow actually social impact to thrive, whether that's through impact investing, like Morgan mentioned earlier, or in other ways. I'm so sorry, buzzer went.
Thank you, Nasir. Noha.
Hello, and thank you very much for inviting me today. I am the executive director and co-founder of a new NGO called Asila. Asila means woman with integrity, talking about integrity. And it is formed by the graduates of my school, the Sacred Heart. And we took the values that we have learned, and this is with the values that we base our interventions. You spoke, Dalia, about principles. Well, values and principles are very important to be cross-cutting, but they're just the beginning. What we need to have after that is the applications of those values and the way we design our interventions with impact and sustainability and transformation. What I have seen is that the gap in Egypt between the wealthiest and the poorest is increasingly growing. We have 50% of the wealth in the hands of only 1% of the population. And as the World Bank 2009 report said, the poverty and vulnerability is on the rise, and it's above 60%. So at the same time, the ecosystem is changing, so the companies are getting more competitive, and I'm talking about companies as partners and our donor entities as well. So they're changing, technology is changing, the design, the way they are structured are changing, the idea of CSR is changing. The donors, the institutional donors also are more focused on closing international crises like the refugees, like interventions in wars, rather than the old model of funding projects after projects. And the NGOs also need to change. The more tactful ones have started to change into having a revenue generation entity, such as a social enterprise or something, because the old model of getting fund for doing a project and getting implemented is changing and is not sustainable and it can't continue. So we are changing as well, and what we have done is try to empower those NGOs. So we are adopting mid-size NGOs and we're accelerating their development. This means transformational management change, but also changing the model they operate. So for instance, becoming themselves a social enterprise instead of being only a community managed entity. And for that, I'm giving an example of an NGO that makes embroidery. So instead of just seasonality of income and pay and doing limited quantities, we're doing it in a way that it has a good return on investment. The gap is huge, and what we aim is to have more mindset, again, as we are talking about that, in all bodies. As Dr. Noha was saying, we need institutional change from within of the mindsets of CEOs and companies, the mindsets of NGOs, and the mindsets also of the donor organizations, because we're not finding a lot of donor organizations that can support us, but luckily the community, and again I touch with what Hashim was saying, the community of our school, we have people who are donating their time to do our movies, our documentaries, our HR interventions, our budgeting, consulting to the NGOs. So the resourcefulness of the community of our school and the passion of being able, of regular people, of changing, is huge. And I'm also talking about the younger generation who are volunteering passionately, the young graduates. So it's not just the older generation.
Thank you all. My name is Tariq. I'm a graduate of the school. I work in investment management currently for Allianz, which is a global insurer and wealth manager. If you wouldn't mind, I'll use less than a minute of my approximately 4 to thank actually the person to my right, who's our next speaker, for contributing to what has been suggested by many of the speakers about education from a young age. I want to thank him for inviting me and others who have some experience in responsible investing and sustainable investing to speak to students at a young age. Sometimes pushing against a lack of traction, I know, but it's an important message to get out, and Angus and other lecturers and educators are certainly people I can attest to who are doing that. So that's on the education front. As for what we do, we are a company that secures and enriches clients through our products. The secure part, responsible management comes into that, in that we have a very clear invested interest to make sure the practices of our clients reduce risks, whether it's property insurance or life and health insurance. That we want all of our people and clients to be doing better. Where I want to focus is the part I'm involved in, which is the enrichment part, the investment part. There's 2 things here where responsible investing comes into it. The first is the fiduciary duty our team has to make sure our clients know that their funds are being allocated in a way that matches their life needs and their risk tolerance. We want to make sure we're asking them the right questions, we're holding their hands, we're not mis-selling. The other part is, once we do raise these funds and we have these clients entrusting us with managing their funds, is where we allocate them and what kind of, to the extent that we also invest in companies through equity participations, which companies we back. And this is where the comments by Morgan, Mr. Dante, and many others are very important. The example that was given by Alex Bank about how the management saw an opportunity in a more variable interest rate environment, and how to protect clients going forward who are on fixed terms, you want to introduce them to a more variable rate product for their benefit, but also for the bank's long-term benefit to retain and grow their customer base. That is where the transition has gone from CSR as being defined mainly in charitable terms, giving back, as it were, to doing right, with a focus on the bottom line and sustainable returns. In the minute I have left, the way we're doing it in our team is, in our research of companies and investment opportunities, ESG is no longer, and for some time now, is no longer a peripheral question that we incorporate in our fundamental research. It's no longer a peripheral question that we incorporate in our quizzing of the management of companies. We ask them about their board independence. We ask them about improvements in their environmental practices. What we don't do, because we're conscious that these standards are still lacking in emerging markets, is not hold them to set defined targets on day one. We want to show them that we're very supportive of the trends they're doing. If they are a highly polluting industry, if they've shown some evidence of improving gradually and doing it consistently, we'll be more willing and able to back them. And the same goes for board composition, governance, and social impact as well.
Thank you.
I hope I've added something to what has already been a great discussion.
Thank you. Angus?
Thank you. I'm the very proud professor of practice, CIB's professor of practice at AUC. I want to go back to making one of the last comments in these 3 days, to go back to the very first day and almost the very first words at this conference, where it was mentioned by Mr. Howard Thomas, the fact that he talked about business schools need to help build a moral compass. And he mentioned also business ethics, which was actually brought up by a number of other people in that panel, the importance of promoting, discussing, debating, and encouraging business ethics. And I think that as a long-term investment banker in London and the region in the last decade here in Egypt, that it's very important that we put these words into practice for a variety of issues. One is, following the financial crisis, there's been a massive increase in worldwide inequality, which we're now seeing in the body politic across Europe and Ireland only a few days ago, and will lead to further problems unless it's dealt with. We can't do all things all the time to all the stresses, but I think Mr. Centeno, the other day when he mentioned this, it's vital that this be addressed in terms of inequality, because it's bad governance. I'm lucky that I'm in a position where I'm teaching corporate governance and business ethics. Been doing corporate finance too, but it's important that we teach students to do the right thing, also teach them what not to do. Having worked at Barings, those familiar with financial scandals, I was at Barings both before and after. We use it as a case study. Important to promote ESG, of course, and CSR. But I think we've also got to make people more awake to the fact that we need to study it. Many people are actually still caught up in the doctrine and dogma of trying to study subjects from the past, which will change with AI and technology. And we've had discussions about this in a department over the last week. I think that let's answer some of the questions that were put forward for today. It's important. I don't want to go off topic, but stay on topic, because it's relevant that we try to come up with some answers. How can a responsible business be effectively integrated within the ecosystem of a business school? Well, first of all, teach it. I think we also have to reach out more. There are lessons I think we can learn from other universities where it's worked. MIT, Cambridge in the UK, Imperial, perhaps, and UCL, where they work very effectively with the private sector. And I'm certain with Dr. Camel to my right that working very effectively with him on a project that we want to do very shortly, in fact 2 projects with him and the provost, to take that forward and make it tangible. I think also the fact that what are the different approaches of promoting practice as a responsible business? Well, I think that, first of all, there are a variety of models. We can't go into all of them today, but teaching is important. I think promoting what works, the example of CIB here and what our friends at PwC are doing is vital, that the market knows what they are. I think it's also important that we perhaps come up with a code of conduct for corporate governance for the private sector in Egypt and the region, because it's sorely lacking in this region from personal visibility of what I've seen in Egypt and the region. A code of conduct of corporate governance, promote that in business associations, and perhaps make it voluntary, but help students understand the need to know that it's important. I think that if we go to one of the other questions, what could be the most effective partnership between a business school and the corporate world? I think that I provided some of those examples. Reach out to the private sector, work with your organization at Ford. I've done some work with the Rockefellers in New York. Reach out to other organizations to show them the benefits, that they can perhaps fund some of that dialogue. I think that what can we do as a business school to show sustainability? Let's perhaps have a goal of being neutral in terms of energy. Look for ways to use the school engineering and architecture to reduce radiant heat and ambient heat at university, to cut energy usage and be solar powered by solar. And I think there's much we can do to promote corporate governance in the wider community to make sure that responsible business is a choice of the first choice of all companies, from startups to mature companies.
Thank you. Sharif?
Thank you, Ali. I think Angus said it all, but let me look at it in a different way. For those of you who heard me talk on Sunday, but also comment yesterday, as a school, we've been shifting more or less over the past 10 years from primarily focusing on shareholders to more focusing on stakeholders. If you look at even the main strategic directions of the school, 3 of them. First is entrepreneurship and family business. The second used to be economic development. We're changing it into inclusive development, and that has a lot of connotation. And the third is responsible business. A bit of a history here. The Gerhardt Center, who is named after the late AUC president from 98 to 2002, John Gerhardt, started as a scholarship in 2002. And then in 2006, the center was established. I actually used to sit on the board of that center, and I tried to push it to become part of the school. Interestingly, I left the school in 2014. It became part of the school in 2015. But it came at a very right time when we positioned responsible business as one of the 3 pillars of the school. Having said that, the work that is being done under the leadership of Ali is unbelievable when it comes to community development, when it comes to capacity building, when it comes to research, when it comes to cases. Yet again, like you said, Dalia, convincing CEOs is not an easy thing. For my colleagues around the room here on the table or elsewhere in the hall who come from academia, if it's difficult to convince CEO, good luck with academics. So it's like it's very slow. That's why you might have heard me say on Sunday that I try from day one to position myself and the school as a CEO and an enterprise, not a dean and a business school, because the world of academics is extremely slow. Why am I saying that? Because we've been working together to try to also embed it in the curriculum. So if you've gone a long way when it comes to community development, which is something that AUC has always been very good at, we're still scratching the surface when it comes to real integration into the curriculum. There are activities because our services are divided into 3 things: teaching, research, and service. I think we tick the box when it comes to service. But in teaching, which is the curriculum that the students get exposed to, we still have a long way to go. Research, it depends. If you integrate the work that Ali is doing, then we're there. If you integrate the work that the faculty are doing, we're not really there. So obviously it's a journey. Again, it's not a destination. But definitely, one more thing that we've integrated big time over the last 2-3 years is actually corporate governance. So we didn't even have that. But it's a journey. If I look today what we're doing through the entrepreneurship concentration as courses, as a degree, as the venture lab at the center that we have, not to shock you, 2008 entrepreneurship was covered in 1 chapter that is given in 1 course that is given through 1 book. That is it. Today, it is one of the most demanded courses, not at the School of Business, but across campus. So again, it's a journey, and I'll stop here to pass the floor to Ghada, but I want to say one thing. When we think of who do we graduate, or we aim to graduate, the first word is principled and innovative business leaders and entrepreneurs who can make a difference. As simple as that. So we start with principled, talking about ethics and other things, and innovative business leaders and entrepreneurs who can make a difference. Thank you.
I don't know what to add. This is the hardest spot to be in. However, I will not waste a second. I think we've echoed all that we are, for years, businesses have built civilization, humanity built civilization and industries with our planet as an afterthought. There's a new climate for doing business, and when you ask us, you're bringing us on the table to ask what challenges are we dealing with. We have multinational stakeholders, we have local stakeholders, we have customers. They've all changed, and you know what? We're out of sync. We're out of sync both in terms of what we do, how we do it, and to attract that new generation, for management on top to really try to build bridges with them. A lot needs to change. With the global challenges that we are confronting or dealing with is leading to what we all are hearing about, which is a revisiting of stakeholder capitalism. These young people are demanding that we act in a more responsible way. I am very lucky to work with a company that has been responsible. We looked at trends like you. We've looked at what the future holds in terms of subsidies removal and try to build our business model around it to solve environmental problems, economic and social. But I want to today just focus on the role that a business school has in such a changing environment. Teaching how profit is made is as important as teaching how much profit should be made. And today, as businesses are transforming, so should business schools. And I think your role, as much as we're looking in the mirror now with all the climate change and all the pressures around us, we're signing the global action for better and reduction of carbon, we look at business schools to say, what is your role? Are you a catalyst? Are you an advocate? Are you an educator? How are you going to help us solve some of those problems as businesses? There is new a need for new leadership, that's true, but you must start teaching students about, as we were hearing here, not just ESGs and the importance of serving all the stakeholders, that we need to start to show them what is a green building. What does going green means in terms of operating in a more sustainable manner? We're starting to see college campuses that are now going green and include the ESG principles. We're starting to see MBA students, arguably most students, want jobs with real social purpose beyond just making money. How are we looking at our curriculum in that light? Increasing number of students applying for MBAs in recent years interested in sustainability and responsible business practices. This stands in stark contrast with the 90s when students had and my whole generation had a completely different set of expectations. Previously, an MBA student, or MBA meant that students were seeking a job for consulting, finance, or banking. Today, these same students are going out looking for, with the management skills, to mobilize in non-governmental and international organizations. Are you preparing them for that? The debate now is not about whether business schools should shift their focus, but rather over how best to teach responsible business practices alongside more traditional skills, and whether or not these courses should be mandatory or optional, integrated, or offered as standalones. According to Ann Harrison, Dean of Haas School of Business at Berkeley, there has been a really profound shift in teaching at business schools from learning how to be rich to going out to make the world a better place. Combining profit with purpose, therefore, is key going forward for the business and educational institutions alike. We need to come up with innovative practical programs. Quinlan School of Business in Chicago, which offers students the opportunity to partake in an urban social benefit incubator that allows students to actually serve others by offering consulting advice. Berkeley, notably one of the more progressive schools, students have been helping manage a $3 million sustainable investment fund. It's also constructing an eco-friendly building working towards zero waste by the end of this year. Business schools also can propose new ideas that can impact policy, like, for example, Harvard and Oxford have proposed new accounting systems that focus on more than just narrowly defined financial returns. It's time for change. I would call for forming a sustainability hub under or within responsible investing, emerging interdisciplinary disciplines to look at trends and look at how we can change. CEO roundtables should be formed because, as you say, if the change is not instilled from the top, it does not happen. Student programs, codes of conduct. I'm trying to write goals. I can't write my sustainability goals because we need more input. Thank you.
Thank you, Rada. Now, I'm going to give the speakers, the initial four speakers, a chance to sort of respond. I'm going to start with Dr. Nohan Mckay.
Thank you very much. That has been quite an enriching and an important conversation. A lot has been said today and in the last few days. I think one thing that I go away with is that for the business school of AUC, there needs to be first a clear understanding of the ecosystem and all the components of the ecosystem, and then a decision made about which parts of that ecosystem can AUC and its business school make the best effect upon. And the approaches are various. We've heard capacity development as an approach, and this is in a business school at a university, of course, a capacity development first and foremost of its students who will go on to become fund managers and bankers and entrepreneurs in their own right. I would add to the excellent ideas already mentioned that in internships for students, maybe you want to think about placing them with international or regional organizations in Africa and Asia in particular that are working on developing the tools for measuring impact. And this will enhance the ecosystem's ability to measure impact moving forward. When it comes to another part of the ecosystem, which is once you're a student and you move on, you become an entrepreneur, it might be interesting for AUC to look at a high table of leadership that exchanges and supports each other and becomes really advocates of the world we want to see ahead of us. A leadership table would be a great improvement on the ecosystem. And then there are institutional investors. We have banks, we have insurance companies here at the table. These are some of the most important institutional investors in any ecosystem for ESG. I would add to them sovereign wealth funds around the world. AUC might want to consider doing research on institutional investors and use that research for advocacy. And finally, moral authority. I would like to see the day when AUC is churning out not only great students with great prospects for entrepreneurship, but also moral voices that engage with the global world today on what capitalism has done to the world, where can capitalism improve on its practices in order to save this world. Joseph Stiglitz, a Nobel Prize laureate, calls it progressive capitalism that changes the structural formula of wealth versus income, work versus capital, and shared value, but seen from the structure of understanding what capitalism is all about. It would be great for AUCians to join that global conversation on that level of strategicness. I thank you for making me come first, because I will need to run out in less than a minute. It's been a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to really echo what Noha was saying about ecosystem, and that what really struck me in the conversation of how there's so many individual initiatives that you're taking on that are so valuable, and at the same time how to have that wrap up into an overall culture of responsible business for Egypt and the region, of recognizing it starting with those students that have that real moral compass and training, and that you really have to build that compass. But then going from there, excuse me, for instance, in the banking sector, of how risk can be redefined to take better into account social environmental value of those companies that are already doing great work on sustainability. Are you creating internships and opportunities for people to learn? Are there enough of the consultants out there who are able to teach what the practices are once corporates have made the commitment that they want to move? And then often the role of philanthropy and really identifying the gaps in that ecosystem and finding ways to build the institutions that are needed, or whether that even be from the perspective of guarantees for new fund managers, or acting as the friends and family for startup capital that not everyone is going to have access to. So I think it's really that concept of how to identify all those different spaces, and then I think that's also another strong research possibility for AUC to have that real sense of what are some of the pieces, or even when we think about capital stacks and that certain types of capital may be very accessible for social investing, and others where there could be more gaps, or there could be a need for more incentives. When everyone is just focused on doing their best work, it can be harder to really see that broader ecosystem piece. So the opportunity to bring this all together is very exciting. Thank you.
First of all, I have a reservation about the word responsible. I think every business should be responsible. It's only normal for the business to be responsible because it supports the brand and it supports the continuity. I think the model of Johanna, CIB, and Alex Bank is a clear example of that. Responsibility is not something that we can learn in the textbook. It's a culture. And I believe in the old days when we were here, the concept of a success is me against everybody else, the money, the money, the money. If we can change the mindset into me within the context of we, I believe that we would have the same individual who is a graduate from here is going to be a student, whether an academic or a CEO. The responsibility is something that's embedded. We can draw their attention. And I believe that Dr. Sharif, in a couple of days ago, they said they will have a program that give the student the chance of have an accredited time in organization where he can see the real world. I believe that including part of social work would enhance this culture. On the other hand, I'm here in the group of very distinguished individuals. Of the first time I come, I usually don't attend meetings because I'm not invited. I am the person who receives the money. I'm the person who knows my people around me. And I have one comment. There's plenty of money. Money is everywhere. I always tell my guys this. The idea that you guys can help us is very simple. We do not lack money. We need money, but we don't lack it. We can get it. We need people to support us into how we can best utilize this money and can support us with the knowledge of how we can take this money and make it into a successful venture. CIB, Vodafone, you guys have plenty of programs. If Vodafone would give us the new entrepreneurs and the new startups, packages with free data, it doesn't cost you much, less than what you pay for building a house. You're giving a support that is very much into your domain. CIB, if you tell the guys how to better manage the money that you borrow, we won't find 13,000 individuals facing a prison sentence because they mismanaged their money. I mean, this is what we really need. Anybody can give you money. And this also is a good support for the NGOs because they turned, some of them, turned into a super machine for money raising. They raise money like crazy. But what do they do with the money? It's just simply a tick on the document that we have spent and we did this, but what's the actual impact? We don't see it. We're at the receiving end, we don't see it. We see 5, 6 projects that are competing with each other in the same village, and then we're thinking, okay, we don't need these projects, we need this, and nobody's addressing this challenge because nobody came to us and asked us, what do you need? You guys are, or most of the guys are looking from it from a glass window, and we are there and nobody talks to us. Please let your people come to the ground, talk to the villages, what do they need, and plan your social responsibility engagement based on the needs that the market really needs, which we need. Thank you very much.
I would like just to continue on this way because I would like to highlight what we did, for example, in a village in Fayoum, where Tunis village, where we changed completely the life of the village, I would say. And this started because I personally discovered this product, and through this, I brought to my board a resolution telling that any giveaways from the bank should have been produced in Egypt and possibly from marginalized community. And we promoted this product, and now this village, we intervene, we support, even in paving the roads sometime, or providing them electrified wheels, and now they are sustaining themselves, and we have left this project, but the life of the village. So there are some examples, but going to the point we discussed today, I marked some keywords. So one definitely is values, because we talk about the most important things when you form a person, a student, and we talk about inequalities, we talk about also the need of flexibility. I think that this, also the sense of responsibility for the business can come from the style of leadership that you may teach. I am very fond, and I have imported a style of leadership that is based on transparency, accountability, sense of ownership, that is well described in a paper of the Harvard Business Review of many years ago that is called communityship. This really allow to create community within companies. And when you set your community, then you can think to the other community, a larger community. Is a kind of sort of leadership that creates some fatigue, because in that companies, and I can testify, confirm this, anybody can be challenged, from the CEO to the others. We are all equal, but with different responsibilities. And that this also can lead to change the governance, corporate governance, because there is no anymore the CEO superhero, but there are committees that take decisions. So I think that, and when we talk about flexibility, the point is that we have to keep, I like telling my people that we are a 60 years old startup. We need to keep the spirit of the startup. And through this we can do many things. We can leverage on what is available, and not complaining about what somebody else should do, but what we can do. Some example, for example, we launch in my business card, there is a logo that is a dummy muzzle. We have done, and we are doing still a fantastic job in the craftsmanship. We are supporting craftsmen. We bring them to formation. 30 of them have got the international fair trade certification. We brought them to Italy to participate to fair. We have a fantastic cooperation with the Ministry of Social Solidarity in this, and these are things that started from inside. First of all, we recognize the value because our customer, we realize our customer were happy to receive this thing. So we understood that this could create a value and if there is a value, there is a market. So we are helping that. So I think that starting from this style of leadership could be very, very important.
It's interesting, the paper you're referring to, treat your company as a community. This is actually a paper by Mintzberg. Mintzberg has a book called, the title of the book, We Need Managers, Not MBAs. He's actually very critical about the schools of business. Now, for me to act as a moderator is unnatural. So I'm just going to take 4 or 5 minutes just to sort of give few comments. Yes, sir.
Ali, can I just make a small comment in 20 seconds?
Please do.
Thank you.
You have 1 minute.
Just 20, 30 seconds. Quick comment on forcing CEOs to become more responsible businesses. Today, over the past few years, the good news is that CEOs don't need to be forced. The money allocated to ESG compliant fund management in the world is rising in such a speed that CEOs around the world cannot miss that trend. CEOs today, while they are maximizing shareholders' value, they need to also become ESG compliant. It's a necessity that is the market and capitalism now becoming more responsible is forcing in itself CEOs to become more responsible. The second thing, actually customers, which is actually something that we've been, I have to admit, very nervous at CIB because now customers ask about ESG responsibility. We're finding it difficult to try to announce what we do, to try to talk about it and embed it into our marketing communication, which Hani mentioned a bit. I totally relate to what Vodafone is doing. And on what Hashim said absolutely correctly, and it actually alludes to what I said in my discussion. Policies are important. The 13,000 people in jail today because they cannot pay their checks, they borrowed money from non-regulated companies. Banks, as a matter of fact, because they are regulated, because in Egypt, banks are very responsible. They don't put people in jail. Policies and regulations have to come in to ensure that those institutions, while they're trying to collect their money, don't use taxpayers' money to help them recollect their money. So thank you very much for raising that point, and I absolutely support it.
Thank you. I'm just going to say a few comments about what I've heard. When we talk about ESG, the mindset is no harm. It's about risk mitigation. This is about your own reputation. This is not about others. Now, if I'm going to talk about impact or do good, this is not about you. This is about your impact in society, and it's about others. It's a leap of faith. Now, remember, to do good, you cannot be doing harm. So it's a prerequisite. But it's a leap of faith of what we're doing. With all due respect, ESG is important, but it's about yourself. It's not about others. Now, the other thing when you talk about impact, how do you do impact in a society? It's either people with wealth giving money or people engaging with the community, civic engagement or volunteering, or responsible business practices. This is exactly what we cover in the Gerhard Center. The only thing we're missing is the government, which is very important. What is the role of business schools? The big role of business schools is creating knowledge. So you have to create a local narrative. For example, talking to Hashim, we're very interested in writing a case study about the kindergarten, about their approach of involving a community, because everybody's talking nowadays about democratizing economy. We have examples in Egypt that we should show, and we should show to our students. Now, the way to do this is to have a case studies. So this is very critical. Now, the other comment is that if you really need, and I think Hashim said that, and I think Noha said that, we tend in business school to be elitist. If you really want to make social change, you really have to have a non-elitist change. I mean, I'll tell you in my example, my daughter is an AUCN, she went in Isaac, and she was in Pune, India. When she came back, she's a completely different person. She's actually more attuned to misery, poverty, what the other would feel. I mean, our kids do not feel this. And I think part of it is, this is the reason we have top-bottom solutions. This is the reason we don't involve communities. The only way to have community-driven initiatives and democratizing is to get our kids involved with communities and to enable bottom-up approaches. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, which I think Blair talked about, is the issue of governance. There are lots of companies sort of following about the SDGs and how things are going. In Egypt, we are lacking in governance. We are not lacking in environment, we're not lacking in social, we're not lacking, and we talk about governance, we talk about ecosystem governance, we talk about a whole governance. This is not just corporations, and it's not just about governance, it's about the whole ecosystem. And it's very hard. I mean, part of it is the culture. Now, the interesting thing, I mean, people talk about governance and value chains. Now, the interesting thing, our topics are not covered in schools of business. It tends to be covered in political sciences or sociology. But I think there is now a trend that is getting into schools of business. Now, the last thing I want to take, there is a group photo, so please do not disappear. And thank you, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And I just, before we leave, I know some of you just attended that roundtable, but I also know that some of you attended since Sunday, the very first roundtable. I thank you very much for coming, for engaging, for contributing, for being here. When we thought of this roundtable a year ago, exactly a year ago in February 2019, we thought of a structure, we thought of doing it by invitation, we thought of the issues and topics that we cover, and we thought that if it's going to be well received, if we're going to have good interactions, we're going to have it as an annual event, not necessarily in February, but an annual event for the school. I've been getting good positive responses. I'll be reaching out to you all, getting more insights on the experience of this time around. But from the outset, I think we will be doing it once every year. Thank you very much for coming.